We are now about 10 days away from the big election day, and candidates' pledges, especially on the economy, are beginning to draw more attention. Following last week's coverage on AI and trade, this week we take a closer look at their plans for labor reform and housing. For this, we are joined in the studio by our economics correspondent, Lee Sujin. Welcome back, Sujin.
Great to be here.
So Sujin, let's start with labor reform. Tell us how candidates are proposing to improve labor conditions here in the country.
Sure. So South Korea's presidential candidates are hoping to win the votes of those wishing for a better work-life balance by, as you said, improving labor conditions. To do so, the two frontrunners have proposed a 4.5-day work week. The current standard work week is 5 days, and most full-time workers log 40 hours from Monday to Friday with a legal maximum of 52 hours per week. The 5-day work week was introduced under a 2003 revision to the Labor Standards Act and fully implemented nationwide by 2011. Now, attention is on whether a 4.5 work week will become a reality this year. And here's how an expert assesses the key goals behind the two leading candidates' proposals. Let's take a listen.
Also, he focused on 4.5-day work week is actually aimed at reducing worker fatigue and improving work-life balance with people hope that this will also boost the productivity. If you look at the Kim Moon-soo's proposal, he believes that with a good negotiation between workers and employers, a more flexible system can be achieved without making dramatic changes.
Sujin, 4.5 work week sounds pretty promising and also exciting at the same time, but do walk us through what each candidate's 4.5 work week looks like.
Right, to start off with Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung, just as we heard from the expert, his focus is on easing worker burnout. He has proposed reducing the standard work week from 40 to 36 hours by cutting Friday afternoons without reducing wages. The proposal also includes providing incentives for companies to adopt the new schedule and has a long-term goal of eventually transitioning to a 4-day work week.
South Korea's total working hours are too long, about 200 hours more than the OECD average. Longer hours no longer mean higher productivity. Efficiency and creativity are now key.
People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo has proposed a 4.5-day work week that maintains the current 40 hours by redistributing working hours across the other 4 days in the week. Under this plan, employees work 1 extra hour from Monday to Thursday and finish earlier on Friday, creating a shorter workday without cutting total weekly hours. He has also said that he supports granting exemptions to the 52-hour workweek limit for the semiconductor sector.
I will replace the rigid working hour system with a more flexible one, cut corporate and inheritance taxes significantly, and drastically reform regulations to help businesses thrive.
Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-suk has strongly criticized a 4.5-day workweek proposal that reduces working hours without cutting wages, calling it unrealistic. He has instead pledged labor reforms include giving local governments authority to adjust the minimum wage to revitalize regional economies.
Now, Sujin, when in Korea, we have to talk about pledges on housing. How do they compare there?
Right, so housing is a key issue for all the candidates, as the country's residence crisis has fueled voter concern and also contributed to the country's low birth rate. While they all aim to increase supply, their approaches differ, and here's how. The key theme of Lee Jae-myung's housing proposal is the New Town. South Korea's first New Town project from the late 1980s, which includes Bundang and Ilsan, now faces an aging infrastructure that he plans to rebuild. Lee has also pledged to cut red tape for Seoul's downtown redevelopment and to develop a fourth-generation new town with more quality public housing. The key theme of Kim's proposal is youth. Kim's 333 Youth Housing Supply Plan offers support for up to 9 years, 3 years after marriage and 3 years each after the first and second child. His proposal includes supplying 200,000 homes for young adults, newlyweds, and families, and more housing for single-person households. The key theme of Lee Jun-suk's proposal is life stages. He plans to increase the supply of 59-meter-square homes by promoting the redevelopment and building of small unit housing. He pledged to promote high-density urban development, citing strong housing demand, and proposed housing tax cuts tailored to newlyweds seeking smaller homes, growing families needing more space, and seniors looking to downsize.
Now, how can these candidates reassure voters that these pledges will be actually realized?
Right, so feasibility has actually been raised as a key area of concern, and it looks like it will be crucial for candidates to make it clear to voters that they will be able to bridge the gap between parties to move policies forward. Here's what an expert said.
I think that for the next 6 months after the new administration, everything depends upon how successful Congress and the government comes up with the revolutionary deregulatory kind of a framework. All we need is a political consensus, and I think this is very much possible.
Well, we'll have to see if the pledges are strong enough to convince the voters. Sujin, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.